What's going on, everybody? And if you haven't heard, there is a new movie out that is highly talked about and it was really anticipated for 2026. And I'm not so sure how people feel about it now, but that is the biopic Michael by Antoine Fuqua. Now, if you were following this film when it was announced and through some of the production, then you probably heard about some of the problems that it had. With all of that being said, I'm sure we all braced for some highly sanitized, estate sanctioned highlight reel. But in reality, what we really got was an incredibly expensive, very carefully curated PR stunt. And that is no fault to the director. I think with all the problems that he dealt with creating this film, I think he actually put out a pretty good film. But with all that being said, grab your snacks, maybe even grab a drink, depending on what time of day it is. But I'm sure it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And let's go ahead and dive into this film. So going into this film, I had to ask myself, is this an honest look at the artist? Because I've seen the Jackson's American Dream, you've seen the documentary, so we all know a little bit about Michael Jackson. Even if you're not a super fan, there's enough out there to know a little bit about him. So going into this film, I was expecting to maybe learn a little bit of something. So in dissecting this thing, it's almost like you can feel the presence of the Jacksons legal team just right off camera. You know, just sitting back in a corner nodding just to make sure every single frame of this film is very, very safe and very, very manufactured. To a degree. The script, in my opinion, is almost a real problem because it's wrapped in bubble wrap and not even given a chance to really do what it was initially supposed to do. No fault to the creative team. Because if you've heard about some of the behind the scenes mess, then you know that this film cost $10 to $15 million just in reshoots back in 2025. And you ask why, I'm sure. And that's another thing that's not any fault of the creative team. It's because the estate lawyers at the last minute realized that a 1994 lawsuit settlement clause meant that they legally couldn't touch most of the things in the third act of the movie that they really wanted to touch. And that's why the movie honestly kind of feels like it's missing something because it ends rather abruptly, but we'll talk about the ending in a minute. So the production team had to go back and basically re-image this movie again after they had to cut out the back part of their movie. And, you know, that's part of their entire story that they were trying to tell. So the creative team, they had to go back and truly explore now with a lot of things being taken out, where do we want to go? And the direction they decided to go was instead of exploring the psychological toll of his childhood, or maybe even playing into some of the realities of his isolation, they decided to play it really, really safe. And by them playing it safe, it makes it come off more as a corporate legacy kind of disguised as a drama because it purposely and completely ignores the complexity of who he actually was. And I'm not saying all that to say you won't like the movie. I'm just saying those are just some things that I picked up on that, you know, didn't quite hit the mark for me. And with that, let's talk about the pacing of this movie because metaphorically, it is like one big giant music video with small breaks in between for life events. The movie spans from this childhood in Gary, Indiana, all the way to the late 80s in the bad era. But in my opinion, the film kind of moves at this breakneck speed that doesn't really allow you to sit with anything. You know, it briefly touches on the Pepsi accident. It briefly touches on the vitiligo, I think it is called. That's the skin spotting. It briefly touches on the plastic surgery. And it even brings up him and shows him hanging out with Bubbles the chimp. But in my opinion, none of it was truly explored deeply. It was all just kind of brushed over. It was given to us, but not in this way where it explained what he may have been dealing with or thinking or even going through psychologically. Or I just think that as soon as you start hoping that we're going to get a little bit deeper, it just speeds off into the next song. Now, the movie is beautiful, visually beautiful. Everything about it is beautiful. The sound, everything, the playlist. It is a great looking sounding film, but it just feels a little bit rushed because they sped through this 20-year timeline. And in my opinion, not giving anything any real time to really stick with you. And I guess what I mean by that is I'm old enough to have sat and seen the Jackson's American Dream several times. And with that, because it's so long, I feel like you learn a lot in that film. So when you see this one, in my opinion, I guess the entire time I'm comparing the two to a degree. This movie, Michael, the Antoine Fuqua version, just feels like a scaled down version of that, but it just looks better and has a couple better actors or whatever the case may be. And speaking of actors, and I should have did this earlier, let me not say anything else without giving Jaafar Jackson his flowers because he pulled playing off his uncle magnificently because he embodied him. It wasn't like this reenactment or this impersonation that we see in Vegas. This was a full embodiment. Sound, moves, energy. It felt like we were looking at Michael Jackson on the screen. So I will give him all the credit in the world for his performance. And don't let me forget as well Colman Domingo, who plays Joe Jackson, and he plays a perfectly chilling character. And we understand why he's the villain of this story. You know, he brings this heavy, terrifying presence, and it makes us understand why Michael does fear him. But that's about as far as it goes because the script is never allowed to, or they just don't go into anything more than surface level drama or anything that was going on in the family at that time or through that time. You know, even the supporting cast was more of an afterthought in this film, in my opinion. They were there, but they were nothing more than just surface level characters. And don't let me forget that I'm not sure how, because she's the second most famous Jackson. And say what you want, and whatever the reason may be, I don't know. I'm not there, and I'm not part of the family, so I'm not even here to really speculate. But Janet Jackson is not in this film at all. So how they managed to erase her? Yes, she was young at the time, but not the entire time because she was on Good Times by the '70s. But so I'm not sure how we ignore some of this, but we ignore some of this. And I understand this is a Michael movie, so we don't have to really concentrate on her. But all the other siblings are mentioned, so just felt like I should add that in. But after speed running through all of that, or should I say moonwalking through all of that, Michael stakes his own thing, and the screen basically cuts to black, and his story or history or whatever they wanted to imply by that, his story continues. And I wasn't aware that this film got greenlit for a sequel. I knew that they wanted to take the part that they had to cut out the 90s portion. I'm not sure if it was 90s into the 2000s or to his death. I'm not sure what they're doing. But I know some of this was the 90s, so I didn't know that this was greenlit. Maybe it's depending upon how well this movie does. I think it will do well, so maybe it will get greenlit. But they're going to have a lot of jumping through hoops to do the back part of the story if they plan on tackling in the legal drama. So maybe they should just leave some of the legal drama alone and maybe tackle some of the tabloid stuff, which is just as salacious if you just want to talk about something, but maybe you won't get in as much trouble if you tackle that stuff. Just my thought. But I think Michael was a good movie. I think it is for the fans, and I mean, obviously the hardcore fans, but I think it's for the fans of Michael Jackson. I think this is a perfectly good movie, and I think you guys will enjoy it. I gave it a pretty solid rating, and I'm not mad about it, but I'm not happy about it. It's not, I just didn't learn anything new. So, I gave it a solid 2.5 out of 5. It sits right in the middle for me, and I kind of touched on the reasons why without getting into too much detail and ruining the movie for you. But I honestly can't really ruin this movie because most people know a lot of this stuff that's going to happen in this movie already anyways. And because nothing is really touched on too deeply, you're not missing a lot that you don't probably already know. And, they do kind of touch on a little bit into some of his motivations on why he made certain songs or, why he did certain things in videos, surface level, but you just don't learn anything new. And that's just my personal opinion as somebody who has seen a lot of this stuff. So maybe somebody who hasn't may have a different opinion. But I definitely need to hear you guys' takes on this one because I am very, very interested to know what you guys think about this film. Have you seen it? If you have seen it, what do you think about it? And please let me know what you disagree or agree with me about. But I want to just give a shout out to the community. Thank you all for commenting, liking on all the videos. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new here. And I will see you in the next one. And I appreciate you for coming. Goodbye.